Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
It's not affordable.
My rent's $560. They've jumped the rent right up to $17.50.
So simplify the construction and the permitting process greatly.
From big cities to small towns, housing is one of the key issues in this year's municipal elections. But what can communities actually do? Also,
help us out by conserving the water that we have.
November is the rainiest, typically the rainiest month of the year for the coast.
Drought, floods, and air quality warnings. Parts of BC face a triple whammy of climate change threats. And Skylight, a meteor puts on a show over the South Coast.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Anita is away tonight. Words of disbelief, anger, but also support are pouring in about Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond's refusal to provide evidence of her claims to Indigenous background. Last night, we brought you a CBC News investigation into the former scholar and judge. Turpel-Lafond has claimed she is a Treaty Indian of Cree ancestry, but her claims do not appear to match the historical record. She says that is nobody's business. Sam Sampson walks us through the mixed response and what happens next in the conversation about Indigenous identity.
A scholar, judge, advocate.
I want to tell you why I feel this agreement is very important for the Aboriginal peoples of Canada.
Now at the centre of controversy, Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond's own Indigenous background up for debate after a CBC investigation. Turpel-Lafond says she is a Treaty Indian, that her father was Cree, but historical records indicate her father was born to a white European couple.
It's everything from hurt and feeling, betrayed to questioning.
Meteor lawyer and advocate Jean Thayer has written on Indigenous identity, spoken at conferences, and had been hired by institutions to delve into others' backgrounds.
They are taking the space up that was meant for Indigenous people. Could they have done this excellent work without taking on red face? Absolutely.
Turpel-Lafond has been accepted as a member of Muskeg Lake Cree Nation, her husband's First Nation in Saskatchewan, for almost 30 years. But Thayer says membership is different from being biologically Indigenous.
You don't necessarily have to have Indigenous ancestry if the rules of the nation will accept you without that, okay? So let's put that aside. You can be a member. That doesn't mean you're Indigenous, though. It just means you're a member of that First Nation. You could be a white woman who marries an Indigenous man.
Those who stand behind Turpel-Lafond are standing strong. The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, the Saskatoon Tribal Council, the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. Many say it's not for the media, government, or anyone other than Indigenous people to determine who belongs.
We have the highest regard for Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond. She's an amazing, brilliant woman who has accomplished an enormous amount in regard to her own personal journey. But more importantly, she has made absolutely stunning contributions to the advancement of all Indigenous peoples in this country, children and families, missing and murdered Indigenous women, youth issues, and so on and so forth. And we value her based on her work and her results, and we'll continue the relationship.
Some universities are working on or already have policies to avoid any doubt. The University of British Columbia, which employed Turpel-Lafond, says it relies on self-declaration. Some say while there are nuances for people who are not status, the way forward is verifying identity.
Can't open a bank account without an ID. You can't do anything. You can't get employed without showing the university your ID. They want my social insurance number. I mean, why not? Does Indigenous governance not matter? Does it not count?
Turpel-Lafond declined an interview. She says CBC's questions about her ancestry are offensive and an invasion of her privacy. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Regina.
The lawyers for a Dutch man convicted of sexually exploiting Port Coquitlam teenager Amanda Todd now want him to serve even less time in prison. That pivot came on the final day of his sentencing hearing. Aidan Coban's lawyers initially asked for a 6-year sentence, but today argued it should be 2. Earlier this year, he was found guilty of harassing and extorting 15-year-old Amanda Todd. Coban is already serving an 11-year sentence in the Netherlands for similar offenses against 33 young victims. His lawyer claims more prison time would be unduly harsh. But the BC judge says she's not bound by the Dutch regime and suggests the offenses against Todd are a separate matter. The Crown wants Coban to spend 12 years in prison after he finishes his Dutch sentence. The judge is set to deliver her decision tomorrow afternoon. Todd took her own life 10 years ago after years of online abuse by Coban. Vancouver police are asking for your help after 2 more random stranger attacks this week. Take a look. On Tuesday afternoon, police say a stranger pushed a 93-year-old man over. He broke his hip. That was at Main Street and East Pender in Chinatown. Meanwhile, the force says a man punched a 29-year-old woman in the face and knocked her to the ground around 6:30 last night near Cambie and Pender. They're the latest in a long string of unprovoked random attacks across the city. Anyone with information is asked to contact police. A large fire tore through an apartment building in Burnaby this morning. Firefighters were out in force on Holdham Avenue and Pandora Street, sending 7 fire engine crews, 3 ladder trucks, and 2 heavy rescue teams. 2 people were taken to hospital to get checked. Firefighters used ladders to save more than 5 people from their homes. Responders are praising residents.
Residents, did the right thing by making early calls to 911. We were able to provide a very strong response from the fire department to aid them in evacuating themselves. But many of the residents did leave their suites without spending a lot of time gathering possessions, which is very good for their personal safety.
People haven't been cleared to return to their homes yet. It's not yet clear what sparked the fire either. Emergency crews in Kelowna rushed to a fire in a homeless encampment along the Okanagan Rail Trail this morning. A fire engulfed a tent with a person inside. RCMP and the Kelowna Fire Department were able to put out the blaze before the person inside was hurt. Mounties say the quick response more than likely saved others who were also sleeping at the time the fire broke out and avoided a potentially catastrophic situation. Officers say that as temperatures drop, they'll be working with city bylaw crews to help people living in the encampment find other places to keep warm. Parts of BC are now facing a triple whammy of climate change-fueled threats. First, after months of dry, hot weather, the government is now warning communities to prepare for flooding when rains do return. The prolonged dry weather and now drought has left soil parched and unable to absorb water. That means increased runoff and river flows. The province is standing ready to help people living near streams and rivers that have flooded in previous falls. Emergency Management BC is prepared to deploy 4 million sandbags to protect homes and infrastructure.
November is typically the rainiest month of the year for the coast. The other thing is we would, on any particular year, see a number of storms that actually hit the coast. Any one of those, depending on the storm severity, could have the potential for flooding.
EMBC is asking anyone in affected regions to be ready. Get a household plan together, an emergency kit or kits, and learn about the local government's emergency plans. As we wait for that rain, the drought we're being hit with has prompted Metro Vancouver to ask you to save more drinking water. Officials say current water use is running 20% higher than normal, while reservoir levels are lower than normal. From August to mid-October, the Lower Mainland normally receives 400 millimeters of precipitation. This year, just 50.
We're having warm, dry weather, and it's becoming really important that we have people really help us out by conserving the water that we have and really being mindful about how they're using the water to make sure that it's going to last until we get the fall rains.
The district says river levels are currently at record low levels for this time of year as well, and many streams are seeing historically low flows. You're asked to take shorter showers, turn off the tap while washing dishes or brushing your teeth, and do not water your lawn. Johanna Wagstaffe, our meteorologist, is here with the forecast, Joe. Flooding on one hand, pleased to conserve water on the other in the middle of a drought. Not very good at all. And you have the third in the triple whammy.
Yes, let's not forget air quality from forest fires. It really is all at once and all interacting with each other. We now have the air quality extended into the eastern Fraser Valley and out towards Princeton. This is because of late season wildfires, both on our side of the border and in Washington. And we do have a bit of a southerly flow right now. So I think most of the brown haze you probably noticed across the south coast today was coming from fires south of the border. But everyone under that special weather statement, find particulate matter a little bit worse over the next 24 to 48 hours. So take precautions if you are at risk. Wanted to show you a couple of snapshots just to put this whole exceptional drought into perspective. This is a snapshot from NASA's satellite yesterday of the Pacific Northwest. You can see Vancouver Island up there. And this was 1 year ago. Note the clouds, a lot of that white is cloud, but we had a lot of mountain snow this time last year. And we are heading into a La Nina. We are expecting snow at some point later in the fall season and in through winter. But that contrast is so stark from 1 year ago today. And again, the accumulating effects of that drought leading to concerns when we do get those fall rains. I wanted to leave you off with a drought map. It hasn't changed from yesterday, but just a reminder of how widespread the situation is. Everyone in BC under some kind of a drought condition, but it is Metro Vancouver on the west side of Vancouver Island under the highest level 5 drought conditions. We are looking at some rain for parts of the province. You're getting it tonight in Prince Rupert and Haida Gwaii, although seeing some sunshine tomorrow as that front lifts northward. There is a front that'll move through next Monday for the south coast. We may see some cloud roll through and a bit of a temperature drop. But Dan, I see some rain in the forecast, October 22nd. Okay. I'll tell you the confidence that I have in that coming up, but that's still a whiles away.
It is. Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
To other news now. People on Bowen Island were treated to a rare sight, a sea otter in Howe Sound. Sea otters aren't normally found in this part of the province. River otters are more commonly seen splashing around our intertidal zone. Sea otters were hunted to extinction along our coast in the early 1900s, but conservationists were able to successfully reintroduce the animal around Vancouver Island in the 70s. Researchers are excited to see the soggy critters in our area.
If we continue to see sea otters there could be indications that the ecosystem is thriving and is a good place. These sea otters could just be exploring outside of the norm, but it would be really interesting to see if seeing sea otters off that coast continues.
Now, if you see a sea otter in our waters, officials say leave them alone, try to enjoy them from a safe distance. But if the otter is in distress and looks like it needs some help, call the Vancouver Aquarium's Marine Mammal Rescue. This week, we're bringing you stories of the major issues facing voters in BC this election cycle. And if you live here, you know the cost and availability of housing is consistently a top election issue for voters. But what can individuals, towns, and cities actually do to influence the housing and rental markets in their areas? As Michelle Gasub is finding out, the answer is more complicated than you may think.
In this election, there's one issue on everyone's minds, and that's housing, housing, and housing. Whether you live in Vancouver, Kelowna, or Smithers, and whether you're a homeowner or a renter, the cost of housing in this province is hitting people hard.
It's not affordable, you know. For talking as a student, it's so difficult.
Horrible. I live in an SRO, and my rent's $560. They've jumped the rent rate up to $17.50 and $18.50, 300 square feet.
Throughout this campaign, lots of people and lots of parties have made big promises about how they're going to improve the housing market. For voters with long memories, some of those slogans can be hard to believe.
And Handsome Gregor was the mayor for most of those 13 years, and his campaign promise was to end homelessness in Vancouver, and we have only seen an increase in homelessness, so I think they're empty promises.
The housing market is complex and affected by many market forces. So while municipal candidates are making big promises, what can they actually do to make housing more affordable?
We can have a completely different city in 2 or 3 or 5 years.
Experts say while it's not entirely in their hands, municipalities do have a wide range of tools to increase the housing supply, which might result in lower prices.
Simple building permits should be issued within a matter of days, not months or years. Access and facilitate access to land creatively, underutilized land right now. And then the densification part, that's going to be harder and it's going to take a little longer. But even that can very successfully be done as long as we focus densification where it's most beneficial and least disruptive.
Municipalities do have a lot of control over how they use their land, but consider some of the market forces that city councils don't have a say in. There's the Bank of Canada interest rate, the rate of inflation, as well as the BC Building Code, which is set by the province. And while cities can encourage new builds, they're unlikely to fund and build new supply on their own. City budgets just aren't built for that.
I think it's more challenging when you're looking at homelessness or units that need to be deeply subsidized on two levels. One, there's a lot of money that's required for that, and cities don't necessarily have access to the resources. So they need the help and the assistance of the provinces and the federal government.
From the biggest cities to BC's smaller communities, the challenges facing the housing market are immense, and the province's new municipal governments will soon have their work cut out for them.
They need to have action behind those promises. I didn't forget.
To make sure the promises of this election don't end up in the stack of unkept campaign slogans. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
We are just 2 days away now from local elections across our province. Historically, about 3/4 of mayors who seek re-election win. But in Vancouver, Mayor Kennedy Stewart appears to be in trouble. Our Justin McElroy explains why.
There are just 48 hours left in this election, and maybe 48 hours left in the reign of Kennedy Stewart.
I'm running for mayor of Vancouver.
That's Ken Sim, and if you believe the polls, he is the favorite to become mayor of Vancouver on Saturday night. One poll showing Sim up by 6 points among decided voters, another one by 18 points. Now, these are small sample sizes, and British Columbians know polls aren't everything. But Sim is also winning the sign war. His ads are everywhere, and he's also getting more people searching for him on Google. In other words, there's a lot of indications that he has the momentum, which may be why most of the negative advertising right now is also about him.
Ken's bagels are pretty good. They have less holes than his policies. They should probably focus on these.
With flip-flops like these, can you trust Ken Sim on anything he promises?
Sim winning would be a big deal, but so would Stewart losing. It would be the first time in 42 years that a Vancouver mayor sought re-election and failed. And it would be the first time in more than 12 years that the left has lost any election in Vancouver. So why are things so close? Well, for one, you can go back to 2018. Kennedy Stewart beat Sim by just 957 votes, the closest election in decades. It meant Stewart didn't have a lot of room to lose support. But the mayor knows the last 4 years have been tough.
I wouldn't say the last few years are pretty good.
Since Stewart became mayor, the price of housing in Vancouver has gone up. Rents have gone up. The number of overdose deaths have gone up. The number of assaults has gone up. It's why the mayor said what he said, and why Sim has a simple closing message.
We can make Vancouver safe again. We can make progress in housing. We can unite the people in this city and craft a future we can all be proud of.
Now, polls can be wrong and a lot can change, but 14 years is a long time for any ideology to run a government, which means in just 48 hours' time, Vancouver could become Sim City.
BC NDP leadership hopeful Anjali Appadurai released her platform on health care today. The climate change activist is running against former Attorney General David Eby. But as she spoke about policy, as Mira Baines reports, she faced more questions over membership sign-ups.
We're trying to make changes in this plan that will move us towards a more home-based, preventative, team-based type of care, which actually reduces burdens on the healthcare system.
Anjali Appadurai, a climate activist, promises a 7-point plan to deal with the province's healthcare crisis if she becomes leader of the BC NDP. She wants to give nurses a 25% raise, implement a full provincial safe supply program to help prevent overdose deaths, and scale up community health centers to replace urgent primary care centers.
It will require public investment. That is my whole approach. We must invest in the systems that are essential to life and well-being.
Meanwhile, David Eby, who stepped away from his role as Attorney General and Minister responsible for housing, has been on tour this week. He announced his housing platform after being criticized for not being visible enough during the leadership campaign. Patarai's campaign has been active and even holding a fireside chat with UBC Professor of Climate Justice, Naomi Klein. Some political watchers say her ideas are good.
I think it was good that she brought in the health plan. I think it's got a lot of good ideas in it. I think it's helpful for her in the campaign as she tries to distinguish herself as more than a single issue candidate. But there are some issues in there that deserve some scrutiny.
The race is heating up. The two leadership hopefuls could be facing off in the first debate on November 5th. That's if Patarai isn't disqualified over membership issues. The NDP and Elections BC is looking into her membership signups and if some members are also members of the Green Party.
I support a respectful approaching of folks who are holding dual memberships and asking them to choose. But beyond that, I don't support the assumption of fraud. We've brought in thousands of new memberships to the party.
It's a strange position for the New Democrats, which has been on its way to coronating EB as leader and premier.
But clearly there's a constituency within the NDP and within the progressive left that sees something in her that she's tapped into. She appears to have signed up quite a few members.
The BC NDP says the work to verify the integrity of its membership list is ongoing. The party's provincial executive is set to meet next week. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Coming up, a fifth estate investigation into luring international students to Canada and the growing calls for a crackdown. Stick around. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. A Toronto attraction known as Little Canada is now planning to make the country smaller, the entire one, in fact. Last month, they sent 4 of their artists to the Atlantic provinces to get a better feel for the Maritimes before rebuilding it.
We're here to capture all of the East Coast, capture its essence, so we can create the most authentic miniature version of what we see.
It's been a long trip. We started in PEI. We're getting a real feel of what the cities and towns are like, and we're trying to just really capture the feeling of the East Coast.
Welcome to Little Canada.
Little Canada is a new tourist attraction that we're creating. We're making all of Canada in miniature form.
So it's everything you would see in the big Canada, just shrunk down to 87th scale. So everything is teeny tiny. There's little cars driving around and, whole mountains fit inside a single room.
Oh, there's like a rooftop.
The challenge is definitely getting everything to fit in. As much as we're doing miniatures and everything's tiny, it's still limited space, and so we really have to pick and choose what we put in and what goes where and how things relate to each other, and being able to do an accurate representation and an authentic representation while still having to work within these really tight constraints of space.
This is good for animations.
I build a lot of the tiny little structures, and I'm so excited to do all the small, colorful, cute little things.
It's so beautiful. I'm overwhelmed by how amazing the scenery is. My part at Little Canada is storytelling and high details, but the scenery is just incredible. Wow.
I think it's just really interesting seeing the scale of everything, because when you're looking at photos and stuff, you don't really see the whole picture of what everything is and how it all relates to each other.
I didn't think it was going to be as mountainy as it is. There's hills everywhere in St. John's, which I did not realize. Everything is a hill. After this, we're driving up to Deer Lake, and we're going to Grosmorn. So I'm very excited to do the boat tour through Grosmorn. And then we're heading home after a long trip.
Canada's Minister of Immigration is calling for a crackdown on Canadian career colleges. As Mark Kelly reports, it follows a Fifth Estate investigation showing how some international students are lured to Canada.
Take it, Daddy.
19-year-old Dilpreet Kaur talks to her father in India to let him know how she's making out at a career college in Toronto. He's a farmer who sold 2 trucks to raise the $28,000 to send her to Canada. But a year in, she says her education feels more like a cash grab.
They just want us to give money and again and again and get rich, filling their pockets, and don't really care about us at all.
International students pay as much as 5 times the tuition Canadian students pay. Most come from India.
The average Punjabi family will have to work 74 years to pay 1 year's of tuition.
So why sacrifice so much? It starts with recruitment agents in India. We took a hidden camera to listen in to the promises and the deception that goes on behind closed doors. We heard agents direct students to little-known career colleges in suburban strip malls, who pay recruiters up to $2,000 for every enrollment. In some cases, students are told their 2-year diploma will get them a high-paying office job anywhere in Canada and permanent residency. Promises they can't make.
The system is built on misinformation. The focus has been numbers-driven, numbers, and that's all, literally, that anyone cares about.
Some colleges now get more money from international students than government funding. Ontario has seen a 342% growth in international student enrollments, especially at small career colleges.
There are certain private career colleges that I'm convinced have come to exist just to make a buck on the back of the international student program. It's completely unacceptable to me.
Fraser says provinces need to put more pressure on colleges to better regulate those recruiters and insist on a higher quality of education so many parents are mortgaging their future for. Mark Kelly, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, that investigation focused on Ontario. Experts say international students are being exploited here in BC as well. For a local perspective, we're now joined by Jashandeep Brar. He is the co-founder of Team We Care Canada. It's a support and advocacy group for international students. Jashandeep, first of all, how common are these issues of exploitation here in BC?
So this issue has been growing really big throughout the country as well. And I believe after Ontario, BC is the second one that we see this problem a lot in. There are a number of private colleges that are growing, and that the colleges that claim that they have partnership with the public colleges or other colleges that will help international students to get the post-graduation work permit. And in BC only, these numbers, they have grown from Vancouver to small cities like Surrey and then going into the interior as well, where international students are promised that they will be able to get their post-graduation work permit after completion of their studies, but afterwards, they are not able to transfer all of their credits to the next college, in which I will take the example that, let's say a student studied and completed 20 credits in 1 year or 15 credits, they are only able to take about 6 or 7 out of it. So this problem has multiple layers, which includes private colleges and the colleges as well.
And this obviously puts a burden on not only that student who doesn't have what they thought they were going to get, but many of them spend the life savings of their families and have very little to show for it. So it's a huge ripple impact.
It has, yes, because we have seen so many cases, because all these people that come here to Canada as an international students to build their careers, to grow their careers, they have spent their savings, they have sold something such as their house or other assets to study here and then build a future. But at the end, when they are known that they will not be able to get the post-graduation work permit, which allows them to work more hours and get to the permanent residency, they are unable to get that. So in that scenario only, with some private colleges, students have to restart their studies. That adds up another $20,000 for their 1 year of tuition.
It must be extremely frustrating. What do you do, or how are you able to help them?
So we are an advocacy group. We are a non-profit organization. So our main focus is on putting on the awareness and then awaiting the awareness among students about how they can tackle the problem, out of which I would like to focus upon the fee. sometimes what happens is that these students, when they come to Canada after one semester or in the first semester only, they realize that they will not be able to get post-graduation work permit. So then now they want to withdraw from that private college. And then those private colleges say that, no, we will not be returning you your money. If you want to leave the college, you have to keep this money as the penalty. So in that scenarios, we educate the new students that no, there should be a policy in which they can only deduct a certain amount of money. So we try to advocate and raise awareness among the students through our social media platforms. And now we are doing some social media lives as well, where we try to reach out to more and more international students and as well as their parents, so that we can educate them beforehand before they're really into the problem.
Josh and Deep Brar with Team We Care Canada, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Day one of the inquiry into Ottawa's use of the Emergencies Act to deal with the Ottawa protest convoy. Who's testifying and what more to expect? Next.
When is a newspaper not a newspaper? When is a free press not free? In Vancouver, it's not a newspaper when the mayor says it isn't. And the free press isn't free when the mayor can close down a West Coast hippie newspaper called the Georgia Strait simply by taking away its business license. He says it's obscene, it's undesirable, and it has to go. So far, the courts have agreed with him, but the other Vancouver newspapers haven't. Tim Kotcheff caught up with him on his Saturday night out.
I'm holding a copy of the Georgia Strait here, and on the top it says, banned by the mayor.
Yes?
Why did you suspend its license?
Well, I think the answer is quite simple. This is was a filthy rag. It was being distributed in our school systems, in our Sunday schools, and I just wouldn't tolerate it, and the only thing to do was to cancel their license. Just read it. I'm sure that if I started reading it right now, that your station wouldn't carry it. I think this is the biggest issue that's hit Vancouver in the last 20 years. I've received over 2,000 letters from indignant citizens of Vancouver who never write to the mayor. I was assassinated by the local press, claiming that I was oppressing the freedom of the press, that this was wrong. This is no press. This is just filth. It shouldn't be sold by the issue. It should be sold by the yard.
Do you think this paper is as bad as some of the others on the stand right now? Hush, Flash, Justice Weekly?
None of them go out to the Sunday schools and the schools and peddle it. I know of instances where people have gone into the Sunday school classroom and taken the collection to buy this paper.
What if they continue to sell the paper or distribute it on the streets of Vancouver? What are you going to do?
I'll take the appropriate action.
What's that?
That's my secret.
Do you know any hippies?
Do I know any? Sure, I know some. As a matter of fact, my dog bit the editor of this paper. He's a most intelligent dog.
All the skaters, all the...
It was day one of the public inquiry into the Federal Emergencies Act invoked on February 14th. It's looking into the events involving the protest convoy that brought downtown Ottawa to a standstill for weeks. Rafi Boudjikanian has the details.
Ottawa police moving in after 3 weeks of little action, putting an end to the blockades and protests on Parliament Hill in February, but the invoking of the act also triggered important questions.
The exceptional powers given to it by the Emergencies Act affects directly or indirectly all Canadians. How and why the powers in the Act were invoked are matters of great public interest.
And on this point, already battle lines have been drawn. Provinces like Alberta pointing out authorities stopped a border crossing blockade there without extra legislation.
None of the powers that were created under the Federal Emergencies Act were necessary, nor were any of them used in Alberta to resolve the Coutts blockade.
The Emergencies Act requires several things. One, it could be invoked due to espionage and sabotage. Are you going to hear any evidence about espionage and sabotage? The answer to that is no. It also could be invoked on the basis of threats or use of acts of serious violence against persons or property. Are you going to hear evidence of violence against persons or property? The answer is no.
We knew from the very beginning that invoking the Emergencies Act is a big step. It had never been done before, but given these unprecedented illegal protests, we needed to take action.
Open publicly, the Commission attracted few curious onlookers today, though they did include Convoy organizer Tamara Leach.
What do you think of the use of the emergency powers? I'm not going to comment on that right now.
As one of 65 anticipated witnesses, Leach will have less of a choice once she takes the stand. The Prime Minister and 7 members of his cabinet are expected to testify as well, and the Commission says it will produce thousands of documents in the next 6 weeks. All this as it expects to wrap up its work next February. The Commissioner already hinting today that's a tall order for a tight timeline. Rafi Bujikani on CBC News, Ottawa.
A big day of hearings in Washington, D.C. as well, with new evidence from the January 6th committee. As Paul Hunter shows us, lawmakers are now aiming at the very top of the former administration.
If the fury, violence, and confusion of that day hadn't already been drilled into the minds of Americans in previous hearings, more remarkable fly-on-the-wall video today from behind the scenes as rioters rampaged on Capitol Hill.
And now apparently everybody on the floor is putting on tear gas masks to prepare for a breach. Well, I'm trying to get more information. They're putting on their tear gas masks.
Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi seemingly dumbfounded by what was playing out that day, and later, along with New York Senator Chuck Schumer, enraged on a flip phone with Donald Trump's then acting Attorney General.
Yeah, why don't you get the president to tell them to leave the Capitol, Mr. Attorney General, in your law enforcement responsibility?
This committee started. All of it played back in what was billed as the January 6th committee's final hearing, along with excerpts from freshly obtained Secret Service emails signaling Trump's own security team knew full well the demonstrators were armed that day and planning violence. With the committee underlining, Trump urged demonstrators toward that regardless in his efforts to overturn results of the 2020 election.
The central cause of January 6th was one man, Donald Trump, whom many others followed. None of this would have happened without him.
But it was at the end of today's hearing the committee dropped its bombshell.
So we want to hear from him.
Chairman Benny Thompson calling for a vote to now subpoena Donald Trump himself.
A subpoena to a former president is a serious and extraordinary action. That's why we want to take this step in full view of the American people.
And in full view, they voted. The result, unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, on this vote, there are 9 ayes and 0 noes.
Paul Hunter reporting from Washington. A Florida jury has now recommended life in prison with no parole for Nicholas Cruz, the gunman in 2018's Parkland school shooting. Cruz pleaded guilty to 17 counts of murder and 17 counts of attempted murder. In February 2018, 14 students and 3 school staff members were killed at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. 17 others were hurt. This is the jury's recommendation. Formal sentencing is November 1st. Canada is now imposing more sanctions on Iran.
Minister Joly has announced new sanctions against 17 people and 3 entities that have participated in or enabled gross human rights violations, including against Iranian women.
This comes on the heels of Iranian authorities' decision to send schoolgirls who protest to what they call psychological institutions to be reformed and re-educated, in their words. The measures will bar 17 people and 3 entities from entering Canada or doing business with most Canadian firms. Among those targeted are Iran's foreign minister and the prosecutor who Ottawa claims ordered the torture of Canadian-Iranian journalist Zahra Kazemi. The opposition and some Iranians in Canada want the Liberal government to list the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist group, something they didn't do in the last 2 rounds of sanctions. A Russian-installed governor in Ukraine is asking for Moscow's help in moving people from the Kherson region. Vladimir Saldo says Ukrainian missiles are hitting civilian areas in that region, and he says he wants Moscow to transport people to other parts of Russia for what he calls leisure and study. Moscow held a widely denounced referendum in the region last month, declaring Kherson part of Russia. But Ukrainian forces continue to push Russian forces out of that region, regaining a town recently lost after months of fighting. Winter in Ukraine will be a grueling test of endurance. The country's forces don't need just weapons, but training to bring skilled soldiers to the front. Canada is making a critical contribution, and Chris Brown saw it firsthand.
The guns and ammunition are real, but these Ukrainian soldiers are far from the battlefields near their homes. This is southern England on a British military base, where British, Canadian, and other allies are training Ukrainian recruits in the skills they need to survive and go on the offensive against Vladimir Putin's army.
There's definitely a sense of purpose and a sense of urgency.
Major Mike Powell commands the roughly 160 Canadian military trainers here.
What I noticed about the courses that ran throughout the summer was there was a real focus on defensive operations, and where we're now trying really hard to instill in the candidates what I'll call an offensive spirit or a patrolling spirit.
In southern Ukraine, near Kherson, and in eastern Donbass, Ukraine's army has been methodically regaining territory occupied by Russia. This scenario is meant to simulate just a small part of what the recruits will experience with the noise and chaos of an assault on the enemy. This live fire exercise is the culmination of 5 weeks of basic training. Within days, these troops will be going back to Ukraine, some straight to the front lines. Perhaps the biggest difference between getting trained here and in Ukraine is safety, says this soldier who goes by the name Panda. Until a few weeks ago, he worked as a design engineer in western Ukraine.
We don't hear any siren on early morning. Missile don't get in our trench or buildings, and we concentrate on our training.
The recruits will leave here trained in weapons, in basic tactics, and how to treat combat wounds in the field, which was the goal of this simulation.
You know, at every opportunity, they always want to know more, they always want to have further training, they want to do more repetitions, and it's all about building up that confidence.
The whole flight is just 5,000 Ukrainian soldiers have already gone through the program, and officers here say the goal is to get 20,000 new soldiers trained up and made as lethal as possible. Chris Brown, CBC News in southern England.
Refusing blood transfusions, fearing that blood might be from those who have been vaccinated against COVID-19. The startling admissions from an Alberta doctor are next. One of Vancouver's most iconic boys in blue is coming home.
Oh, and hit the stanchion and came right back. What a heads-up play by Kevin Bieksa.
Yeah, it wasn't a pretty goal, but it didn't need to be. That moment fondly remembered by Canucks fans around the province when Kevin Bieksa scored in a second overtime to win the game and send the team to the Stanley Cup final in 2011. We know how that turned out, though. The Canucks announced today Bieksa will sign a one-day contract so he can retire with the squad where he first started his career. Bieksa will play his final NHL game on November 3rd against the Anaheim Ducks, the only other NHL team he's ever played for. Well done. To something else that's blue. If you happen to be looking up at the night sky last night, you may have caught a glimpse of some dazzling light displays. Take a look. Just after 10:18 p.m. last night, a meteor turned the darkness into big blue light. It lasted about 6 seconds, but many people from North Vancouver to Oregon saw it. Astronomers say while seeing a fireball is rare, the fireballs themselves, pretty common. Thank God, here's another expert to tell us how common these fireballs are. Yeah, I saw that this morning. Joe had to pass it along.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you flagged that in email because I was not looking up and westward at 10:18, unfortunately.
Again, we've talked about this.
I know, 10:18. I'm just going to see. Yeah, there is no connection between 10 and 18.
He was watching the National. Come on.
There you go. Yeah. Very cool. And you're right, very rare to actually see it, but becoming more common thanks to cams.
Mm-hmm.
So check your door cam if anyone has one.
Not just for Amazon purchases.
Exactly. Yeah. So there you go. There is no alert to let you know when the next one's coming, but you know I am watching the rain closely. So let me get you through the forecast because I am starting to see some show up in the long range. Starting off with current temperatures, though, it was another muggy one, dare I say. Bit of a humidex across the south coast as we head into the evening hours. The diurnal swings are picking up. We're starting to see temperatures drop a little earlier as we lose that daylight as we head towards winter. I want to take you to the long-range temperature trend because the temperatures are correlating with the dry conditions. So keep your eyes on the green. That's the above seasonal, and the dry, and that's the big high-pressure ridge, taking you through Friday into the weekend. Now, Monday, Tuesday, we start to see a little cold front push in. It really just slides up against the coast. It'll drop our temperatures by a couple of degrees, not bringing much as far as rain, and then watch Thursday, Friday, that ridge builds back in. Well, we've got the blue across eastern Canada and Atlantic Canada. Those are fall conditions. We are very much still under that ridge of high pressure through all of next week. And that's reflecting in our temperature trend as well. It's going to be a warm weekend once you get through the morning chills. Away from the water, 24s for Vancouver. And then there's that cold front Monday dropping us back down to still above seasonal. Seasonal for this time of the year for Vancouver, 14. Seeing that heat tomorrow in through the interior, 18 for Williams Lake, 22 for Kelowna, and look for that sunshine in Prince Rupert towards the second half of the day. Through the next few days, it is going to feel very warm in the afternoons. That cold front moves in for Monday and Tuesday. We keep the warm and dry conditions going through Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. It's Saturday. So 10 days out from now that we start to see a change in the weather pattern, a more zonal flow, meaning systems coming in from the Pacific. So I'll keep you posted. We've seen this song before where it shows up in the models and then disappears, but I have more confidence this time.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Alberta is seeing a dangerous trend. Patients refusing blood transfusions from people vaccinated against COVID-19. And as Jennifer Lee tells us, doctors are raising the alarm.
Calgary obstetrician Dr. Stephanie Cooper was counseling someone ahead of a C-section when the patient refused to consent to a blood transfusion if the donor had received the COVID vaccine.
I see, people with severe hemorrhage due to childbirth on a regular basis. And so for me, the idea that that this is out there is just somewhat, mind-boggling.
Canada's blood supply doesn't register the COVID vaccination status of donors. And while her patient ultimately didn't need a transfusion, Cooper is worried about the next time.
By declining blood, it means you will die.
There are other cases too.
So we're seeing it about maybe once or twice a month at this stage. And, the worry, of course, is that these requests might increase.
Dr. David Sidhu is the head of transfusion medicine in southern Alberta. He says that includes parents asking for blood products for their children from unvaccinated donors.
There's currently no medical or scientific reason for the questioning of the safety of blood from vaccinated or unvaccinated donors.
Sidhu says so far parents have agreed to transfusions after learning more. Some adults ultimately refused, but doctors were able to treat them in other ways.
There is no evidence to support these concerns.
Timothy Caulfield is a Canada Research Chair in Health Law and Policy at the U of A. He says resistance to blood transfusions is fueled by misinformation, and it's becoming more common.
It's happening not just in Canada, but really all over the world.
When these situations arise, doctors counsel patients and share factual, science-based information. But competent adults have the right to refuse treatment even if the decision could harm them.
This is a decision that could have a direct impact on the well-being of this patient. And so it really highlights, I think, how powerful misinformation can be. I mean, it can really have an impact in a way that can be dangerous.
All this, experts say, highlights the need to improve science literacy.
We need to start thinking now for the future to make sure that when the next time comes for another vaccine campaign, we get less of this craziness being bought up by people.
The best place to start, he says, is in schools, ensuring the curriculum gives students a strong enough foundation in biology so they actually understand the science behind how vaccines work. Jennifer Lee, CBC News, Calgary.
An ocean away, 2 Welsh grocery store owners are living a life at sea. We're going to catch up with them in Nova Scotia. Stick around.
I could see the water coming, and it was beige, it was brown, it was white, it was all different colors. But like, I didn't really think it was going to come in that far and that fast.
Gary hollered out to me next door neighbour, the guy was just here. Balls, he says, the breaker, what we call the breaker, the sea come in.
Grace went before I went out, and I fell on the bridge and into the water, and I started going down to the cove.
And when she struck me, I went down on my rear and she pushed me. And then she pushed me up against under our neighbor's Jeep. I held onto the pipe on her Jeep. And I was singing out, help me, somebody help me.
It was cold, yes, but pain, I didn't even know my leg was bleeding until I took the pants off. Like, I never felt nothing, didn't even feel my hand, didn't even know like that.
It took me from there then, and carried me right over there by that boat and smashed me up onside the bank. And I mean, I almost lost my life. I would have been gone if it wasn't for if I didn't grab that guy rail. Other than that, I would have been gone myself.
And my brother-in-law seen all this, so by the time, he was down, like trying to help me, but he couldn't find me. The water was so high over my head. He just couldn't do it by himself, right? So then I could hear him singing out, help, we need some help over here, help, help. They tried, and Brian said, we can't get her out. But then they looked and realized that my jacket was hooked on something under the Jeep. So Brian ripped my jacket off and they just pulled me out.
Crawling and trying to get up. I tried to get me over water because water was going down my throat. It was just look, like my sister said, mother was looking after me. She said, still look at me. She said, gone, right? Because when my turn to go, I look at it.
I love house cleaning and stuff like that. That's small stuff now. I don't care anymore. Like, if you come into my house and there's dishes all over the table and dishes in the sink, I'm not going to worry. As long as I make you comfortable and you feel comfortable in my home, that's all that matters to me. What else? Who cares about the dirt anymore? Not me.
Just hope I get some out, start over, that's all. I'll be off 7 years now in December. Now I got to start over. And I only got a small pension, so I don't know. Well, sometimes you wonder if it should have went on, I looked at it, but try to stay alive, I suppose.
BC Votes 2022. Housing, safety, transportation, and climate change. What do the next 4 years look like? Watch CBC News and stay informed at cbc.ca/BCVotes.
2 seafaring men from Wales had to ride out Hurricane Fiona in LaHave, Nova Scotia. A temporary delay in the life of the 2 brothers who left their grocery delivery jobs to go where the wind and their sailboat took them. Colleen Jones caught up with the pair before they cast off on their next adventure.
Starting to turn off the wind now.
They left their home in Wales over a year ago, sailed down to Spain, then crossed the Atlantic for an adventure and thrill of a lifetime.
Because they're strong.
I find brothers Luke and Adam Martin at the LaHave River Yacht Club. Tired of living the grinded-out 9-to-5, live-for-the-weekend lifestyle, the sailing brothers decided to live life now.
It's a lifestyle choice. Drop everything. Sold our motorcycles, everything we owned, all our possessions, moved aboard a boat.
They've documented their journey on their YouTube page, The Sailing Brothers. At first, this was just to keep their family in the loop. But they've developed fans living the adventure vicariously through them. Luke edits the YouTube stories here in the tight cabin.
We edited 2 episodes while crossing in the middle of the Atlantic.
There are reminders of home in the cabin. Their mom made the ship's cat, and she gave them this trip around the world pillow. Well, this is their first trip here. They have read Nova Scotia's Joshua Slocum's book about his solo round-the-world trip.
That's what started it all.
Joshua Slocum from Nova Scotia.
Yeah, that's inspired it.
Along the way, they've had some rough seas. They've battled seasickness. They've enjoyed the sea life, but sailing into New York City?
All the way into New York Harbour, didn't we? Yeah, we did. Fast as well, wasn't it? Yeah, really fast with the tide going in there. You can see the Statue of Liberty just appearing.
With their rigging repaired in LaHave, they're getting ready to leave.
Skim Bermuda without stopping, hopefully, and then straight to the Bahamas. 15 days of hell.
For 2 guys who've never even flown in a plane, this adventure makes their former life as grocery store delivery drivers seem an ocean away.
The freedom. Yeah, total freedom.
So the rest of us are kind of chained to the desk.
Yeah, working, living for the weekend. And life shouldn't be like that because life is too short. So you should make most of your life while you can.
Colleen Jones, CBC News, LaHave.
Some good advice. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. Remember, you can watch this newscast on CBC Gem. That's our free app, as well as YouTube, Instagram, and on our website, of course, cbc.ca/BC. I will have your next local news at 11 o'clock tonight, right after the National. We'll see you then.